The neon sign outside Maggie's 24-hour diner flickered like it might give up at any moment, buzzing softly against the cold Ohio night. Rain streaked the windows in uneven lines, blurring the passing headlights on Route 6. Inside, the diner smelled of burnt coffee, fried onions, and exhaustion, the kind of place people ended up when they had nowhere else to go. Officer Mark Reyes sat in the corner booth with his back to the wall, habit drilled into him from 15 years on the force. His uniform was wrinkled, his badge dulled by time and too many long nights. Across from him, stretched awkwardly on the cracked vinyl seat, lay Rex. Rex had once filled rooms without moving an inch. A German shepherd with sharp amber eyes, broad shoulders, and a reputation that made suspects sweat before he even barked. Now, one of his back legs rested stiffly to the side, wrapped in a brace that looked more like a sentence than a solution. Mark watched Rex breathe, slow, careful, controlled. "You did good tonight," Mark murmured, sliding half his grilled cheese onto a napkin. "Don't let anyone tell you different." Rex's ears twitched, but he didn't move. The vet had said the injury might heal. The department had said maybe. The unspoken word hung between them every day, replaceable. The bell above the diner door jingled as a man entered, shaking rain from his coat. He was average in every forgettable way, mid-40s, baseball cap pulled low, jeans, boots worn thin at the heels. He took the booth 2 rows ahead of Mark, facing the window. Never looked back, never looked around. Mark noticed anyway, cops always did. The waitress Linda poured coffee without asking. "On the house," she said quietly. "Rough shift." Mark gave a tired smile. "Aren't they all?" Linda glanced at Rex, her expression softening. "He okay?" "Depends who you ask." She nodded like she understood more than she said and walked away. The stranger ordered meatloaf, ate fast, no phone, no distractions, just fork to plate, eyes occasionally flicking to the reflection in the window. Rex's nose lifted slightly, sniffing the air. Mark didn't think much of it. Diner smells confused even the best dogs. Rain intensified outside, pounding harder, louder. Mark's radio crackled once, then went silent. Dead zone again. The stranger finished eating and stood. He walked past Mark's booth, close enough that Mark caught the faint smell of motor oil and something sharper underneath. Ozone, maybe. The man didn't look at him, didn't look at Rex. But Rex looked at him. For a split second, the dog's body stiffened. His ears went high, his eyes locked. A low, nearly inaudible sound vibrated in his chest. "Easy boy," Mark whispered, resting a hand on Rex's neck. The man pushed through the diner door and disappeared into the rain. Linda came over moments later, receipt in hand. She frowned. "You've got to be kidding me." "What?" Mark asked. She turned the receipt around. The tip line was blank, $0, not even a scribble. "Some people," she muttered, "ate the whole thing too." She reached to clear the table. Rex moved. Not fast, but deliberate. His head slid off the seat. His nose dropped low. He limped forward, ignoring Mark's command, tail stiff, attention razor-focused. "Rex," Mark said sharper now, "heel." Rex didn't respond. He stopped at the stranger's booth and pressed his nose to the underside of the plate. His breathing changed, short, sharp inhales. His injured leg trembled as he shifted his weight. Linda paused. Is he?" Rex whined, loud, urgent. The sound sliced through the diner, turning heads. Mark stood up fast. "Sorry, he must have caught a..." Rex pawed at the floor. Once, twice. Something slid out from under the plate and fluttered to the tiles. A folded piece of paper. The diner went quiet in that way places do right before something goes wrong. Linda bent down, confused. That wasn't there before. Mark's pulse quickened. Rex planted his paw firmly on the paper, claws scraping tile, eyes locked on Mark with an intensity he hadn't seen since before the injury. "Okay," Mark said slowly, crouching. Okay, buddy. He picked up the paper. It was warm. Mark unfolded it. Just one line, written in uneven handwriting, like the person hadn't had time to steady their hand. He's watching you both. Don't trust the badge. Mark felt the air leave his lungs. The words didn't make sense, and yet they did. Too clean, too specific, not a prank, not random. Rex growled, deep and protective, staring at the diner door like he expected it to open again. Mark looked up. Outside, through the rain-streaked glass, a car idled across the street, headlights off, engine running. Mark folded the note slowly, every instinct screaming. Who had been watching? Who knew about Rex? And why did his injured partner, written off by everyone else, seem to understand the danger before he did? The car's brake lights flared red. Rex barked once, and then the engine revved. The car across the street didn't pull away right away. That's what unsettled Mark raised the most. It idled through the rain like it had nowhere to be, or like it was waiting for something. Red brake lights glowed faintly, reflecting off wet pavement and puddles filled with neon from Maggie's flickering sign. Rex stood rigid beside Mark, every muscle tight, his low growl barely audible but constant, vibrating through his chest like a warning siren. Linda, Mark said quietly, not taking his eyes off the window, lock the door. She hesitated. Mark, you're scaring me. Please. Something in his voice convinced her. She turned the sign to closed, slid the deadbolt into place, and glanced nervously at the idling car. The engine outside revved again. Then the car rolled forward, tires hissing on wet asphalt, and disappeared into the night. Only then did Rex relax, just a fraction. Mark exhaled slowly, realizing his hand had been hovering near his holster the entire time. Everything okay? Linda asked. Mark looked down at the folded note in his hand. I don't know, he said honestly, but I think someone just tried to warn us. He paid his bill, added extra cash to make up for the stranger's insult, and clipped Rex's leash back on. Rex limped but stayed alert, glancing over his shoulder as they stepped out into the rain. The parking lot felt too open now, too exposed. Mark helped Rex into the patrol car and slid into the driver's seat, locking the doors the moment they were inside. Only then did he open the note again. Don't trust the badge. That was the part that wouldn't settle. The badge was supposed to mean something. Order, protection, a line between right and wrong. Mark had believed in it for most of his career, even when it disappointed him. Especially when it disappointed him. Rex shifted beside him, whining softly, nose brushing Mark's knee. Mark rested a hand on the dog's head. You smelled him, didn't you? Mark murmured, whatever he was hiding. Rex's ears flicked forward. Mark started the engine and pulled onto the road, but instead of heading back toward the precinct, he drove the opposite direction, toward the older part of town, where streetlights flickered and buildings leaned like tired men. His radio crackled suddenly, loud enough to make him jump. Unit 12, come in. Mark stared at it. The radio had been dead inside the diner. This is 12, he said carefully. Change of plans, dispatch said. Report directly to the South Precinct. Captain Doyle wants to see you, now. Mark's jaw tightened. Captain Doyle didn't summon people at 2 in the morning without a reason, and he especially didn't summon officers who were technically off duty. Rex let out a sharp bark. Mark glanced at him. You don't like that, do you? Rex growled again, louder this time, eyes fixed on the radio like it had insulted him. Mark didn't respond to dispatch right away. He drove in silence for 3 blocks, rain drumming on the windshield, the note heavy in his pocket. Finally he keyed the mic, copy en route. But he didn't turn toward the South Precinct. Instead, he headed for an abandoned strip mall near the river, a place Mark knew cameras barely worked and radio reception was spotty. A place to think. He parked beneath a burned-out streetlight and shut off the engine. For a long moment, neither of them moved. "Okay," Mark said quietly, "let's break this down." He pulled the note out again, studying the handwriting. It wasn't rushed, but it wasn't neat either. Whoever wrote it had been careful not to draw attention, not careful enough to hide their fear. "He's watching you both," Mark read aloud. "That means me and you, buddy." Rex's tail thumped once. "And don't trust the badge means," Mark trailed off. "Someone inside the department." The idea made his stomach twist. Mark thought back over the last few weeks. Evidence that went missing. Arrests that never stuck. Orders that didn't make sense but came from high enough up that no one questioned them. And Rex, suddenly sidelined after one bad operation, written off faster than Mark expected. Too fast. Mark reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a folder he hadn't opened in months. Rex's medical reports, injury photos, the internal memo recommending early retirement due to declining field reliability. Signed by Captain Doyle. Mark's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He stared at it until it stopped ringing. Then it buzzed again. Against his better judgment, he answered, "Raise." A man's voice came through, low and strained. "You found the note." Mark's grip tightened. "Who is this?" A pause, then, "Someone who knows what they're doing to you, and to that dog." Mark glanced around the empty lot. "If you know so much, why not meet me face to face?" A short, bitter laugh. "Because I don't want to end up like the last guy who asked questions." Mark's blood went cold. "What last guy?" Silence. Then the line went dead. Rex barked sharply, spinning toward the darkness beyond the car. Mark followed his gaze and froze. A shape moved between the abandoned storefronts, too big for a stray, too deliberate to be coincidence. Headlights flared suddenly behind Mark's car. Another vehicle had pulled into the lot. Mark's radio crackled again, louder now. "Unit 12, dispatch said. You're not heading to the South Precinct. Explain." Mark slowly reached for his seatbelt, eyes flicking between the shadow ahead and the lights behind. Rex snarled, teeth bared. Someone had been watching. And now they were closing in. The headlights from the second car blazed across the cracked asphalt, cutting long shadows over the puddles. Mark's hand hovered over the wheel, knuckles white. Rex's growl had deepened, a low, guttural warning that vibrated through the metal frame of the car. Every instinct Mark had learned in 15 years on the force screamed, "They knew you were here." He stepped on the brake slowly, keeping the engine idling, eyes darting between the dark figure beyond the lot and the approaching car. The stranger, tall, bulky, movement precise, paused in the shadows, as if studying him, reading every micro-expression. Mark's radio buzzed again. "Unit 12, stop immediately. Captain Doyle is on site. Do not proceed." Mark's jaw tightened. Doyle's voice always carried authority, and right now it felt like a trap. He glanced at Rex, whose amber eyes glimmered with pain and purpose. The dog's injured leg trembled as he shifted, but he didn't break his stance. It wasn't just fear, it was recognition. Recognition that something was very, very wrong. Mark weighed his options. The note, the unknown caller, the shadow in the lot, and Rex, his partner, his friend, discarded by a system that had once celebrated him. "I can't trust them," Mark whispered, gripping Rex's leash. "Not anymore." He put the car in gear and turned away from the street, toward the older part of town, the part where buildings sagged like tired men, and the streetlights flickered in uneven rhythm. A place where a cop's authority could disappear in an instant. Rex limped, but he moved beside him, ever alert, ears swiveling, tail stiff. Every sense the dog had left pointed to danger. Minutes passed in tense silence, broken only by the soft splatter of rain against the windshield. Then a shadow appeared at the edge of the lot behind them. Someone, or several someones, were following. The headlights bobbed as the vehicle kept pace, refusing to overtake. Mark's heart raced. He remembered every case where following led to ambushes, and every partner he had lost in his career. Rex's weight against his leg was a comforting reminder. He wasn't alone. Mark turned sharply down a narrow alleyway lined with rusting dumpsters. The pursuing car screeched to follow. Tires splashed through puddles, metal grinding against concrete. Mark's stomach clenched. He was trained for pursuits, but this wasn't a chase. This was a warning, a trap. They emerged onto a deserted street running along the river. The buildings here were abandoned factories, boarded windows, graffiti splashed across crumbling bricks. Mark slowed the car, letting it idle near the edge of a river embankment. He cut the engine. Silence fell. Rex shifted, pawing at the seat. His nose pressed against Mark's hand. Something wasn't just watching them, it was waiting. Mark stepped out of the car cautiously. Rain plastered his hair to his forehead, drenching his uniform. Every instinct told him to retreat, to run back toward the city lights, but he couldn't. Not yet. Not with Rex. A rustling sound echoed from the warehouse across the street. Footsteps, deliberate, controlled. Someone was inside, waiting. Mark crouched low, motioning Rex to heel. The dog limped forward, but every step was deliberate, powerful despite the injury. He sniffed the ground, ears swiveling, eyes scanning. Mark's radio buzzed again, static at first, then a whisper. "Unit 12, you don't belong here." Mark's pulse spiked. Someone on the other end knew where he was, and that someone wasn't friendly. He glanced at Rex, who had stopped at the warehouse door. His body tensed, hackles raised, teeth slightly bared. It was the same posture he had when he had cornered armed suspects before. Mark swallowed hard. "Good boy," he murmured, but inside he felt a chill. This wasn't a routine call. This wasn't an abandoned building to check for squatters. This was personal. He reached for the door handle and paused. The note, the message, "Don't trust the badge." Mark's eyes scanned the warehouse. Windows shattered, metal creaking under the wind, faint footprints cutting through dust and grime. Fresh. Someone had been here recently. And now they were inside, waiting. Rex growled again, low and warning, as if sensing Mark's hesitation. He nudged Mark's hand toward the door, urging him forward. Mark knew Rex was right. He had never been wrong before, not once. Taking a deep breath, Mark pushed the door open. The smell hit him first, oil, rust, and something sharper underneath. Blood, he couldn't tell. The dim light inside made everything look twice as ominous. Shadows stretched along the walls, moving with every shift of the weak moonlight filtering through the broken windows. Mark's hand went to his holster. Rex stayed by his side, muscles coiled, eyes scanning. Then he heard it, a voice, calm, almost too calm. "Mark Reyes." The words froze him in place. Familiar, trusted, but the tone was wrong, too smooth, too controlled. Mark's blood ran cold. He recognized the voice immediately. "Captain Doyle," he whispered under his breath. Rex growled fiercely, his body vibrating with restrained aggression. Mark realized, with a sinking feeling, that the note had been right all along. They couldn't trust the badge. Not now. Not ever. A single movement from the shadows caught Mark's attention. Doyle stepped into the weak light, a smirk on his face, hand hovering near a weapon. Behind him, a large duffel bag sat open on the floor, its contents glinting ominously in the dim light. Mark's mind raced, piecing together months of misplaced evidence, missing cash, the bureaucratic sidelining of Rex. The department had been compromised. Doyle was the proof. Rex growled louder, stepping forward despite the pain in his leg. Mark swallowed hard, adrenaline flooding his veins. Doyle smiled again. "You've been asking questions, Reyes. Funny how curious cops always end up broken." Rex bared his teeth. The growl escalated, reverberating in the empty warehouse like a warning siren. Mark's heart pounded. And then Doyle moved toward him, slowly, deliberately, weapon in hand. The warehouse seemed to shrink around them. Every shadow felt alive. Every creaking floorboard screamed danger. Mark raised his hands, but his mind knew the fight wasn't about him anymore. It was about Rex, and whether a once-broken dog could rise again when the stakes had never been higher. The rain outside intensified. The river behind the warehouse gurgled angrily, as if echoing the chaos inside. Mark's pulse spiked. His hand tightened on Rex's leash. "Not today," he whispered. Rex lunged. And that was when the real fight began. The warehouse was silent for a heartbeat, and then chaos erupted. Rex leapt forward, his body coiled like a spring despite the limp in his injured leg. He crashed into Captain Doyle, teeth bared, growling like a predator that refused to accept defeat. Doyle staggered back, surprised at the ferocity of the attack, his hand reaching instinctively for his firearm. Mark dove for cover behind a rusted metal support beam, heart pounding, adrenaline surging through his veins like wildfire. "Get him off me," Doyle yelled, kicking at Rex, but the dog held fast, jaw locked on Doyle's arm. Mark crawled forward, keeping low. Every instinct screamed at him, "Don't interfere too early. Let Rex protect you." Rex twisted Doyle to the ground, snarling. The captain's smirk had disappeared, replaced by wide-eyed panic. Mark's gaze flicked to the duffel bag Doyle had left open near the wall. He could see stacks of cash, bundles of evidence tags, and what looked like confiscated narcotics. The realization hit Mark like a punch to the gut. Doyle had been running a covert operation from within the department, manipulating evidence, siphoning funds, and now he was willing to kill to protect it. "Rex," Mark shouted, "get back now." Rex paused only for a second, then released Doyle just enough for Mark to move. He scrambled to Rex's side, feeling the dog's body tremble, not from fear, but from exertion. The brace on his leg had slipped slightly during the scuffle, leaving him more vulnerable than ever. Doyle scrambled backward, blood trickling from a small cut on his forehead where Rex's teeth had grazed him. "You think you can stop me?" he sneered, grabbing a crowbar from the floor. "You and your mutt are finished." Mark's mind raced. They were outnumbered in intelligence, outgunned, and trapped inside this derelict warehouse. But he had Rex, and Rex had him. He remembered the note. Don't trust the badge. Whoever had left it had been right. Every officer who should have been an ally now felt like a potential enemy. Every sound outside, every approaching footstep could be another threat. From somewhere above them, the faint scuffle of movement echoed. Mark froze, realizing they weren't alone. Another presence. Another pair of eyes watching, calculated, waiting. He glanced at Rex, whose ears twitched, body coiled like a spring again. The dog's instincts had never been wrong. Mark's fingers clenched on the gun holster at his side, but he knew shooting blindly inside the warehouse could be disastrous. Doyle had leverage in every corner. Mark needed a plan, and fast. "Rex, flank left," Mark whispered, voice barely audible. The dog responded immediately, limping but determined, moving along the perimeter of the warehouse with the agility of a predator, even on his compromised leg. Doyle noticed. "The dog, kill the dog," he barked, swinging the crowbar wildly. Rex dodged, muscles coiled, snapping in quick, precise motions. Doyle stumbled, losing his footing momentarily. Mark seized the opportunity, lunging forward and sweeping the crowbar from Doyle's hand. The dull clang of metal hitting concrete echoed, mixing with Rex's low growl that sounded more like a war cry than a warning. Mark grabbed Doyle's collar, pulling him toward the ground as Rex circled, eyes blazing. "It's over, Doyle, it's over," Mark shouted. But Doyle's laugh, bitter and cruel, filled the warehouse. "You think this changes anything?" Doyle spat, straining against Mark's grip. "There are people higher than me, people who will bury you both. You're too late." Mark's heart skipped a beat. He realized Doyle wasn't bluffing. The note, the warnings, the shadows, they all pointed to a larger conspiracy within the department. Doyle wasn't acting alone. The sound of tires on wet concrete outside the warehouse made Mark's pulse spike. Backup, or another threat? He couldn't tell. The faint hum of approaching engines echoed through broken windows. Whoever was outside had the advantage of surprise, and Mark knew any hesitation could cost them everything. Rex barked sharply, turning his gaze to a corner where a faint glimmer of movement caught his eyes. Mark followed the dog's stare. Shadows shifted unnaturally. Someone was slipping inside silently, calculating every step. Mark's fingers tightened on Doyle's jacket. Rex now. The dog lunged at the intruder, teeth flashing in the dim light. The figure froze, then bolted toward the exit. Mark scrambled to keep up, slipping on wet concrete, heart hammering. Doyle tried to take advantage of the distraction, but Mark's grip held firm. Outside, headlights illuminated the alley. Figures moved quickly, more than one. Mark realized with growing horror that Doyle hadn't been alone. He had allies, and now they were closing in. Rex limped to Mark's side, growling at the approaching figures. Despite the pain, the dog's courage never wavered. Mark felt a surge of determination. They might be outnumbered. They might be betrayed, but with Rex beside him, he had a fighting chance. The rain pelted harder, masking the sound of footsteps and muffling distant sirens. Mark pressed his forehead against Rex, whispering, "We're not done yet, buddy, not by a long shot." From the shadows, another pair of eyes appeared, watching, calculating. Someone who had been following the chaos from the beginning. And Mark knew instinctively this wasn't over, not by any measure. The warehouse doors creaked ominously behind them, the shadows stretching as if alive. Mark's grip tightened on Rex's leash. Heart hammering, eyes darting, every nerve on fire, he realized one truth that chilled him to the core. They weren't just fighting Doyle. They were fighting the entire system that had set them up. And someone or something was still watching. Rex barked again, a sharp, defiant warning into the stormy night. Mark knew the real danger was only just beginning. The shadow outside shifted closer. And then in the faint neon glow of the alley, Mark saw movement that froze his blood. Someone familiar. Someone he had trusted. The game had just become personal. Mark's chest tightened as the figure stepped into the dim alley light. His stomach sank and Rex growled, low and menacing, teeth bared. The man's face was unmistakable, Captain Doyle. But it wasn't just Doyle. Behind him, a faint outline of movement revealed a second presence. Someone else had been shadowing them all along. Mark swallowed hard, trying to steady his racing heart. The betrayal wasn't just about him anymore. It was about Rex, too. The loyal, brave dog who had been written off, sidelined, discarded by the very department that once celebrated him. "You shouldn't be here, Rays," Doyle said, voice smooth, calm, deliberately slow. "I warned you, and yet you disobey. Foolish." His eyes darted to Rex, narrowing. "And that dog, he's past his prime. Weak. Broken, just like you." Mark felt a flash of anger, burning hotter than fear. "You lied about everything," he spat. "The evidence, the orders, Rex being sidelined, it was you, all of it." Doyle's smirk widened. "Evidence is fluid, rules are flexible, and the badge, that's only as trustworthy as the man who wears it. You and your little mutt are lucky I'm giving you a warning tonight." Rex growled, stepping in front of Mark. Despite the limp in his leg, he planted himself firmly, a living barrier between Mark and Doyle. The dog's gaze locked onto Doyle's every move, calculating, ready to strike. Doyle kicked at the duffel bag by his feet, sending its contents, bundles of cash, stacks of confiscated narcotics, evidence folders, scattering across the wet pavement. The metallic clink echoed through the alley like a warning bell. Mark crouched low, gripping Rex's leash tightly. "Stay behind me," he whispered, though he knew Rex wouldn't obey blindly. The dog's loyalty was absolute, his instincts sharper than any officer. "You think you can take me," Doyle said, voice rising. "You think a broken cop and a lame dog can stop me, There are people higher than me, Rays, people who have been cleaning up after you for years. You're too late. Mark's pulse spiked. The pieces clicked together in an instant. Missing funds, misfiled reports, sabotaged investigations. It wasn't just Doyle. He had been running a covert network inside the department, manipulating cases, covering for dangerous allies. And now, any attempt to stop him would put both Mark and Rex directly in the crosshairs. Doyle, Mark said carefully, trying to buy time. This ends tonight. You don't have to do this. Doyle laughed, a bitter, cold sound that scraped against Mark's nerves. I already did it, Rays. I've won. You're expendable. Mark's eyes flicked to the duffel bag again. That was when he saw it, an envelope partially hidden under the spilled evidence. He lunged for it, ignoring the sting of wet concrete against his hands, and flipped it open. Inside were photographs, secret surveillance of Mark and Rex from the past month, notes about their routines, weaknesses, even Rex's injury progress. Damn it, Mark muttered under his breath. Rex growled, sensing Mark's frustration and anger. The dog's amber eyes blazed. This wasn't just about survival, it was personal. Doyle noticed Mark's movement. Stop that. Step away from the bag, he barked, swinging the crowbar he had retrieved from the wet pavement. Rex reacted instantly, lunging at Doyle's arm again. The dog's jaw snapped inches from Doyle's hand, forcing him to stumble back. Mark took the opportunity to pull Rex closer and grab the duffel bag's remaining contents. You've underestimated him, Mark said through gritted teeth. You've underestimated both of us. Doyle straightened, face tight with fury. Enough. Before Mark could react, Doyle lunged at him, aiming to knock him to the ground. Rex twisted, intercepting the attack despite the pain in his leg, teeth flashing as he clamped onto Doyle's jacket, forcing him to stumble again. Mark scrambled, trying to regain footing. He could hear the distant wail of sirens, backup, or maybe just another layer of the trap. He didn't know. All he knew was that Doyle couldn't get past Rex. Not now. Not ever. The dog's body shook from effort, but his resolve never wavered. Every movement was precise, calculated, instinctual. Years of training, years of loyalty, years of betrayal, it all fused into this single moment. Doyle, bloodied and enraged, finally stepped back. Mark held his breath, knowing the slightest misstep could end everything. The duffel bag lay open between them, evidence of corruption spilling into the cold night. Mark's eyes met Doyle's, reading the calculation behind the smirk. Doyle had assumed victory. He had assumed Mark and Rex were easy prey. You think you're heroes, Doyle sneered, wiping rain from his face, but heroes get eaten alive. Mark's hand tightened on Rex's leash. Not today. Rex barked once, low and threatening, signaling that the fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. But even as they prepared for the next move, Mark noticed something else, movement above. Someone had been watching the entire confrontation from a second-story window of a nearby building. Mark's stomach dropped. Whoever it was wasn't neutral. They had knowledge of everything, Doyle's corruption, the duffel bag, and the note that had started this chain of events. The rain pounded harder, masking the sound of footsteps on the metal fire escape. Mark realized with dawning horror, Doyle wasn't acting alone, not by a long shot. Rex growled again, sharper this time, as the shadow descended toward them. Mark's pulse raced. Doyle's smirk faltered slightly as he noticed the movement. Back up or another threat. Mark didn't know. All he knew was that they were outnumbered, outgunned, and facing betrayal on all sides. Rex limped forward, but his amber eyes burned with the same determination Mark had always admired. Mark whispered almost to himself, "Let's finish this, buddy, whatever it takes." And then, from the darkness above, a new figure dropped silently into the alley, someone Mark had never expected to see. Someone who could change everything. The fight wasn't over. It had only just begun. The figure hit the alley floor with a soft thud, blending instantly into the shadows. Mark's heart leapt. His eyes flicked to Rex, whose hackles were raised, muscles tensed, amber eyes fixed on the newcomer. Despite the pain in his leg, the dog's body coiled like a spring, ready to strike, every sinew screaming threat detected. The figure stood slowly, revealing a faint outline under the dim glow of the street lamp. A young man, lean, in dark clothing. His face was partially hidden by a hood, but the weight of urgency in his movement was unmistakable. "Who are you?" Mark called, keeping his voice steady though his heart raced. The young man didn't answer immediately. He glanced at Doyle, who had staggered backward, still nursing his bleeding arm. Doyle's eyes widened as he recognized him. "You? How? What are you doing here?" Mark realized with a sinking chill that this was no random observer. This man knew Doyle personally, knew what had been happening inside the department. Perhaps he was the anonymous caller, the one who had left the note in the diner. Rex growled, stepping forward, his injured leg trembling beneath him. Mark's hand rested on the dog's neck. "Easy, boy, let me handle this." But Rex's stance didn't waver. His eyes locked on the hooded figure and back to Doyle, calculating. Then Doyle made a move, a desperate lunge toward the young man with his crowbar. Rex reacted instantly. Pain forgotten, he launched himself between Doyle and the newcomer. Teeth snapped inches from Doyle's face, growl deep and threatening. Doyle stumbled backward, hissing in frustration and rage. Mark seized the moment, rushing forward to tackle Doyle. The captain went down hard, slamming against the wet concrete. Rex lunged again, keeping Doyle pinned, snapping and barking like a predator protecting its pack. Mark's hands were shaking as he tried to cuff Doyle, who thrashed wildly. "Stay still," he shouted. But Doyle wasn't the only threat. The hooded figure had moved silently to the duffel bag, rifling through the spilled contents. Mark's eyes widened. The figure was grabbing files, documents marked internal investigation, evidence, and cash flow audit. They weren't just cleaning up Doyle's mess, they were collecting proof. Proof that could bring the corruption crashing down. "Who are you?" Mark demanded, voice echoing in the alley. The man looked up briefly, hood falling back, revealing a determined, sharp-eyed face. "I'm the one who tried to warn you," he said quietly. "I left the note. That's all you needed to know until now." Mark's pulse spiked. This was the whistleblower, the stranger who had trusted him and Rex when no one else would. Doyle's rage boiled over. "You think this changes anything?" he spat. "You have no idea who you're messing with." Rex snarled, his teeth bared, muscles trembling under the strain, but his loyalty never wavered. He wasn't just a K-9. He was Mark's partner, protector, and a force to be reckoned with. The whistleblower glanced at Mark. "Take him down. I can't hold him long enough alone." Mark's hands shook, but he nodded. Together, he and the whistleblower maneuvered around Doyle, whose strength and desperation made him dangerous even pinned against the wet alley walls. Rex snapped again, forcing Doyle to stagger backward. Mark lunged, slamming his forearm into Doyle's shoulder, knocking him down just long enough to secure cuffs around his wrists. Doyle cursed, struggling against the metal restraints, his eyes wild with panic and fury. "You think this is over? I have friends. I have power." Mark stared him down. "Not tonight." The whistleblower leaned over, quickly stuffing the most incriminating documents into a waterproof bag. "This is everything. We bring this to the right people, and Doyle doesn't stand a chance." Mark exhaled sharply. The tension in his shoulders eased just slightly. Rex shifted beside him, whining softly, his body trembling but resolute. Pain, injury, betrayal, it didn't matter. He had chosen. He had chosen to protect Mark. And in that choice, Mark realized something else. Rex wasn't broken. Not anymore. He had been sidelined, discarded, written off, but right now he was unstoppable. A distant siren wailed. Reinforcements were coming. Mark knew Doyle's allies wouldn't be far behind, but for the first time that night, he felt a spark of hope. He glanced at Rex, amber eyes glowing in the dim light. "Good boy," he whispered, kneeling to stroke the dog's head. Despite the pain, despite everything, Rex had done the impossible. Doyle spat blood onto the wet asphalt, glaring at the pair. "You don't understand. This isn't over," he growled. Mark shook his head. "Oh, we understand perfectly, and now everyone's going to know the truth." Rex growled again, low and steady as if to say, "We finish this together." The whistleblower glanced nervously at the shadows surrounding the alley. "We need to move," he said. "There could be more coming. Doyle isn't the only one protecting this operation." Mark nodded, looking down at Rex. "You ready, buddy?" The dog barked once, sharp and decisive. Despite the limp, he moved forward, alert and unwavering. Together, the three of them, Mark, Rex, and the whistleblower, slipped into the night, disappearing into the rainy streets as Doyle struggled against his restraints, cursing and promising revenge. Mark knew the fight wasn't over. It was far from over. But in that moment, with Rex by his side, he felt a renewed determination. They had taken the first step. They had survived the ambush, exposed the betrayal, and now they had the evidence to fight back. The rain soaked through Mark's uniform, cold and relentless, but he didn't care. Rex limped beside him, head held high, amber eyes scanning the shadows, always vigilant. And somewhere in the darkness of the city, more eyes were watching. Mark clenched his jaw. Whatever was coming next, they would face it together. Rex had chosen his side. And so had Mark. The night was far from over, but the first victory, small, yet significant, was theirs. Then from the rooftops above, a faint movement caught Mark's eye. A shadow detached itself from the building opposite the alley, watching, waiting. And in that instant, Mark realized the real fight was only just beginning. Rain streaked the city streets like silver knives as Mark, Rex, and the whistleblower, whose name Mark now knew was Eli Turner, slipped into a narrow alley. Mark's coat clung to him, soaked through, and Rex's injured leg left shallow imprints in the puddles. The adrenaline from the fight still coursed through his veins, making his limbs tense and alert. Every shadow, every dripping pipe, seemed to conceal another threat. "We can't go back to the precinct," Eli whispered, scanning the deserted streets. "Doyle's network runs deep. He's got allies in every division: patrol, investigations, administration. If we turn this in the wrong way, he'll vanish, and you too could be next." Mark nodded grimly, stroking Rex's head. "We have to get this evidence somewhere safe. Someone outside the department, someone who can't be bought." Eli's face hardened. "I know a journalist, trusted, careful. She's been tracking Doyle's operations for months. She'll know what to do." They moved quickly, sticking to shadowed side streets, avoiding the faint glow of streetlights. Rex limped beside them but kept pace, muscles coiled, eyes scanning for danger. Despite the strain in his leg, the dog's resolve never faltered. Mark glanced at him and felt a surge of pride and relief. The dog had risked everything, and now they were one step closer to exposing the truth. When they arrived at the journalist's safe house, a small, brick-fronted townhouse tucked between shuttered shops, the door swung open before they could knock. A woman in her early 40s with sharp eyes and a determined expression appeared, holding a flashlight in one hand and a notebook in the other. "Mark Reyes," she said, voice steady but urgent. "I've been expecting you." Mark's pulse jumped. "How?" She waved him inside. "Eli called, told me you'd be coming. Sit, explain, and keep that dog out of trouble." She gave Rex a wary glance, and Rex responded with a single, measured bark. Mark laid out the events of the past 24 hours. The diner, the note, Doyle's betrayal, the duffel bag, the fight in the alley, and the shadowed figure on the rooftops. Eli added context, explaining how the corruption ran through the department, how Doyle had been siphoning evidence and funds for months, and how his influence had silenced anyone who questioned him. The journalist, Clara, listened, taking meticulous notes, occasionally glancing at the duffel bag of documents and photographs that lay on the table. "This is explosive," she said finally. "If we publish this, Doyle and his network won't just be exposed, they'll be prosecuted. But you have to understand the risk. This could put your lives in danger, especially the dog's. He's already marked as compromised." Mark swallowed hard. "We don't have a choice. Rex, he risked his life tonight. We owe it to him to see this through." Clara nodded. "Then we move fast. I'll prepare everything to go public. You'll stay here tonight. Tomorrow we go live. Doyle and his allies won't know what hit them." The night dragged on, filled with tense planning and quiet moments where Mark reassured Rex, checking his bandages and making sure he was comfortable. The dog lay on a blanket, head resting on Mark's knee, eyes flicking to the window whenever a shadow passed. He had been injured, betrayed, and written off, but he had survived, and now he had purpose again. Hours later, Mark peeked out the window and saw faint flashes of movement on the streets below. Doyle's allies were already searching. Mark's stomach clenched. The betrayal ran deep, and they wouldn't stop until they found him and Rex. Clara's laptop hummed as she encrypted the documents, prepared encrypted emails, and set up secure channels to distribute the evidence to multiple media outlets. Every keystroke was deliberate, precise, a race against time. Mark leaned back, exhausted. "Rex, you did it," he whispered. The dog's tail thumped softly in acknowledgement, eyes half closed in rare relaxation. "We're going to make them pay for everything they did. You, me, Eli, we're finishing this." Just as Clara finished encrypting the files, the room was filled with a sudden, chilling knock at the door. Mark froze. Rex's ears twitched, his body stiffening immediately. "Who is it?" Clara called, voice sharp. No answer, just silence. Then the knock came again, louder this time, more deliberate. Mark motioned for Rex to stay close. He crept to the door, hand hovering over the bolt. "Mark, raise," a voice called from the other side. It was Doyle. Calm, smooth, infuriatingly confident. "Open up. You know you can't hide forever." Mark's blood ran cold. Despite the evidence, despite the documents, despite everything, they were still at risk. Doyle's reach extended further than they had realized. Rex growled low in the background, tail stiff, body coiled. Mark could feel the dog's fear and determination merge into a protective force, a bond stronger than anything Doyle could break. Mark glanced at Clara and Eli. "Get ready," he whispered. "This isn't over." The knock came again, this time followed by the unmistakable sound of the lock being tampered with. Mark felt his chest tighten. Every plan they had made, every precaution, was about to be tested. Rex barked sharply, a single decisive warning, his amber eyes locked on the door. Mark reached for his weapon, hands trembling with tension. He whispered one last command to Rex. "Stay ready, buddy. Whatever comes through that door, we face it together." And in the shadows beyond the door, Doyle's smirk could almost be heard, his plan still unfolding, confident that he had the upper hand. But he had underestimated one thing: the bond between a man and his dog, broken but unyielding, loyal and fierce. And now that bond was about to change everything. The knock on the safe house door intensified, sharp and relentless, echoing through the narrow townhouse. Mark Reyes tightened his grip on Rex's leash, muscles coiled and alert. The dog's low growl rumbled in his chest, ears forward, eyes locked on the door. He hadn't moved this fast in months, yet every step was deliberate, every sense heightened. Despite the pain, he was ready. Clara moved quickly, sliding a heavy metal chair against the door. "We can hold him off," she said, voice taut. "But he won't stop. Doyle has resources and patience." Mark glanced at Eli. "Do we have a way out?" Eli shook his head. "Not without exposing ourselves or the evidence." His jaw tightened. "But we can make him pay if we play this right." Mark's pulse raced. The duffel bag sat on the floor between them, filled with damning documents, photographs, and evidence of Doyle's corruption. Every page was a weapon. Every photograph a hammer poised to shatter the career of a man who had betrayed everything Mark had ever believed in. Rex whimpered softly, then planted himself firmly in front of Mark, growl deepening. He knew what was coming. He had always known. The doorknob rattled violently. Doyle's voice filtered through the thick wood. "Mark, I know you're in there. Open up or the dog gets it." Rex's ears twitched at the threat, hackles rising. Mark's hand moved to the dog's head, stroking him gently. "Not today, buddy. We finish this together." Mark pulled out his phone, sending a secure message to the journalist network Clara had contacted earlier. Within minutes, encrypted files began to stream to multiple trusted outlets. Doyle's operation, his allies, his stolen evidence, everything, was now in the hands of people who couldn't be intimidated. Outside, tires screeched. Vehicles approached the townhouse silently, headlights off. Doyle wasn't alone. Mark's stomach twisted. He counted 3 cars, possibly 4, reinforcements, backup from inside the department, friends or pawns of Doyle ready to finish the job. Mark's jaw tightened. "Eli, prepare the exits. Clara, cover the files. Rex, stay with me." The first blow came suddenly. The door shuddered under a heavy kick. Mark ducked instinctively and Rex lunged forward, teeth snapping in warning. The wood splintered. Doyle's smirk became visible through the crack. "You can't hide from me forever." Mark fired a warning shot into the ceiling, the loud crack startling everyone. Glass rattled. Rex barked sharply, lunging to intercept Doyle as the door finally splintered open. The hallway filled with chaos. Doyle's men surged forward, guns drawn, but they hadn't counted on the storm Mark and Rex had become. The dog twisted, limping slightly but attacking with ferocity, biting and snapping, forcing the attackers to stagger back. Mark moved with precision, using cover, striking with force, protecting Rex and the whistleblower. Clara clutched the laptop, typing rapidly, ensuring every file streamed safely. Mark knew the moment of exposure was imminent. Doyle could command loyalty, bribe, threaten, but he couldn't control the press. He couldn't stop the truth. Doyle lunged at Mark, crowbar swinging. Rex reacted instantly, throwing his full weight into Doyle's chest despite his injured leg. The captain staggered, yelping, and Mark seized the opportunity, tackling him to the floor. The scuffle was brutal, wet concrete pounding, splintered wood snapping. Blood ran from Doyle's cuts, rain mixing with sweat, slicking the floor. Mark's hands shook with exertion but never let go of Doyle's arm as Rex snarled, holding him pinned. Outside, sirens wailed. Backup had finally arrived, responding to the reports Clara had initiated. Doyle's allies hesitated, realizing the fight was no longer theirs alone. Mark's voice rang out over the chaos. "It's over, Doyle, you're finished." Doyle spat blood, cursing, thrashing. "You think this changes anything? My network, you'll never survive the fallout." Mark shook his head. "You underestimated us. You underestimated him," he said, gesturing to Rex, who barked once, defiant and unwavering. With the arrival of law enforcement, Doyle and his allies were quickly subdued. Handcuffs clicked into place, evidence secured. The documents, photographs, and files that Mark, Rex, and Eli had fought for were verified by the authorities, ready to dismantle the corrupt network that had festered inside the department for years. Mark knelt beside Rex, running a hand down the dog's wet, trembling back. "You did it, boy. You saved more than me tonight. You saved the truth." Rex leaned into him, amber eyes glowing with trust and loyalty. Despite the injury, the pain, and the betrayal, he had made his choice. He had chosen to protect Mark, to fight, to survive, and to prevail. In the weeks that followed, Doyle's network unraveled completely. The department underwent a sweeping internal investigation. Officers complicit in the corruption were removed, prosecuted, or forced to resign. Public scrutiny ensured the reforms were swift and uncompromising. Mark and Rex returned to active duty, honors restored, the dog officially cleared to work again. He walked with pride, head held high, tail wagging in slow, deliberate arcs. No longer broken, no longer discarded. One evening, Mark took Rex to the same diner where it all began. The booth where the note had been left sat empty. Mark placed his hand on Rex's head, remembering the fear, the betrayal, the fight for truth, and the courage of the dog who had refused to give up. "Thank you," Mark whispered, "for everything." Rex wagged his tail, then nudged the empty plate as if acknowledging the invisible stranger who had left that first warning. Somewhere out there, someone had believed in them when no one else did, and now the city knew the truth. Mark stood, leash in hand, looking at the street where the rain had begun to ease. The neon glow of the diner reflected in the puddles, a reminder that hope could survive even the darkest nights. Rex barked softly, limping beside him, eyes still scanning the shadows, but no longer afraid. Together they walked into the dawn. The story was over. But the bond, the courage, the loyalty they would carry forever. And for Mark and Rex, that was more than any tip, more than any badge. It was everything.